kind of touchy, I guess, to say the least, and your efforts to look to move them and relocate things and then bring them back to where we are, you know, that seems like a formidable effort. I think, you know, the highlight of that is you're really showing the prospect of our land in our town and the value of the land in our town and the resources that we have that other people might not have. And, you know, I just think there's a lot going in with that. Now, we're looking at, what did we say, 40 acres is exposed right now, correct?
I'm sorry,
40 acres about roughly is exposed right now?
About 30.
And about 30?
40, and 10 of which has been restored.
And this is visible from what used to be the scenic, was there a scenic cut on Route 12?
Yes.
That was a scenic view, correct? Was that state? Off of Hopkins, that was deemed by the state, is that correct? When did that go away?
I'm not sure. 1960s.
70s.
70s? Okay, I'm just curious, you know, I think that definitely affects our landscape and where we're at. We look at the process of, you know, what's going to happen with this in the long term. We're reclaiming where we've been. Think about residents in Jackson, you know, off of Jackson Road that we may not be around here for, you're right, you know, but what kind of setup is that for them? What kind of incentive is that for them to move into our town where I already know people that live on the outskirts of this. I have family that's actually moved because of this operation and they couldn't take it and they couldn't take the bang, bang, bang all the time. I know you guys, as you know, you're really doing your diligence as a company. I have no problem with you guys as a company and doing what you need to do. I look to the board to look at our town and what do we want to do? This is not the only operation happening. This is, you know, we have a lot of holes that haven't been filled already, and I'm not saying that you guys are going to be part of that. I love and admire the fact that where there's blasting happening, you guys are protecting the neighbors' wells. I think that's really important, and I wish more companies were probably doing that around here, because you are pulling a resource and you need to get back to that. I'm really interested to see what we would be left with in any shape or form. You know, after this is done, I hope that the town, if you guys approve this, you really, you know, tightly monitor, and I hope that you guys get to see, you direct neighbors get to see what's happening. I do have a lot of fear that property values will fluctuate, probably not for the best due to this. I don't see where property values are going to go up. And what we have left of our town, is this what we're going to be, a truck town? Is you know, I was late here for the meeting. I was stuck behind a train that was changing off the spur that's existing. I know you said that, Jackson. That's God's honest truth. You know, you were late because of the spur being transferred. You're saying, you know, there'll be no traffic. In addition, you're going to add another spur. Is that correct? You'll add another spur to get better access here?
No, there's an existing spur now.
You're just going to use the existing spur? Does that increase that train traffic at all for the residents?
No.
Same amount of cars?
Our production of that plant is a fixed production level, so we do 600 to 650 tons an hour. So by having more gravel permitted, it doesn't give us the ability
It's just
to increase
located.
the production and increase the truck traffic.
Understood. How many times do you block like Cemetery Hill per day on average? I'm just curious.
Well, understand that, you know, after we load the rail cars, we release them to Providence and Worcester Railroad. Once we do that, we have no control over what they do.
And I just want to point out, we have to state what this application is, and that rail crossing at Cemetery is not part of this application, so we really
Okay.
can't.
I was
This public hearing-
more curious if it would increase traffic on there, how many times, or if there were specific times a day that you're releasing cars. Do you have a time? Can you release any time of night to Providence, Worcester?
We could release any day. I mean, we don't work on Sundays at all, but other than that, we could be releasing cars any day, but they may not pick them up for 2 or 3 days after we release them. So it's based on a scheduled day.
On the trade schedule.
We have no control over
So they determine the schedule.
that. Yes.
All right, I think that answers it. Thank you, guys.
Any other comments or questions from the audience or board members or staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion to close public hearing.
Do I have a second? All in favor of closing public hearing? Anybody opposed? Okay, so the public hearing is closed. Moving on to the regular meeting, so I'll call the meeting to order. Lou, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
There are two. They are application 2018-1313 of Ernest Colella for a site plan review at 28 Main Street in Noosa. And application 2018-1314 of Dolly Colella Development for an 11-lot subdivision on Moosa Pond Road and Smith Road.
So this is citizen participation, so this, oh, sorry, yes. So I'll need a motion to enter those under items B and C on new business, please.
Don't make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so we have items B and C. So now it's citizen participation. So this would be the opportunity to talk about an issue that outside of the public hearing. So anything that was not in the public hearing, right? Okay. So unfinished old business, we have item A, 2017-1275 of BB Company LLC, requesting a 3-lot re-subdivision on property located on Coleridge Road, Plainfield, map 27, block 6, lot 5C, RA 60 zoning district. Items for discussion of the item first.
The plans do address all of our regulations for subdivision. There's two things I would like to ask of the developer. I did speak with Paul Archer about this. Oh, yes, about that. There other property on Coleridge Road. You think we can get another turnoff there, make it a little bit safer?
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
Now, I have two of them now.
Yes, but
Now,
you have a lot of big
where's the
space
third one?
between Coleridge Road and the one that you're gonna be putting in.
Is there an anchor for the street right there?
So we can find a spot to put it in.
Now, what happens when there's people that own land between my lots up there when they develop their land? That doesn't work for them?
Well, we'll deal with that if they submit an application.
But there's no turn on to put in?
We'll look at that when they give us an application area.
And isn't it your practice as a board that you only ask for improvements on the property front that the application is done?
Not necessarily, no.
Oh, okay.
You'll put another one in?
Depends on how.
We'll look at it, how's that?
Okay, we'll look at it. I'll just.
Okay, so that'll be outside of
Yeah, and then one other thing, at the far end where you have the turnaround, just give us an easement so that the general public can use that beginning of the driveway to turn also.
Yeah,
So-
school also, anyway, I'm gonna
Yeah.
get up to that.
Yeah, well, we need the easement too, just so the future property owner doesn't say, keep off my
I think the town has
land.
an easement on it right now.
Pardon me?
I think the town has an easement on it right now.
I don't think we do, but if we do, fine, if not,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll give you.
thank you. Other than that, I have no more comments.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion from the commission considering the suggestion of the easement. Okay, so I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, application is approved. Moving on to Z, 2018-1279, continuation of Strategic Commercial Realty, Inc., requesting a special permit for gravel excavation on property located on Jackson Road, Central Village, map 7, block 53A, lots 41, 43, and 42, map 8, block 53A, lots 134 and 147, RA 60 zoning district. Items for discussion from the board. With the special permit, our application, 5 years is the maximum special permit. So in looking at that review and considering the proposal, I would prefer to consider phases 1 and 2, because that would be within a 5-year period. And looking, right, right, it's a special permit, so we have to reapprove the previous, right? Okay, because it's a renewal and an expansion. So we have phase 1, which they said will be completed within the next year or so. Phase 2, they'll be starting within the next year or so, and according to the information submitted, phase 2 is going to take approximately 7 years. So I would be looking to stay within our 5-year maximum. I wouldn't want to approve something that has the possibility of being a 30 to 60-year plan and handcuffing future boards who may have a different idea of, the world is changing. Habitats are changing, and also in the Army Corps, it does say that they will submit a 5-year plan showing summary and progress as well. So right in the Army Corps, it talks about a 5-year summary and submission. So I would like the board to consider that, and if the applicant has any suggestions or input on that.
Well, our primary purpose for filing the application with the town was to get approval for the overall plan, recognizing that we're still obligated to come in every 5 years, regardless of whether we're working on phase 1 or 2 or whatever. So with that understanding, yeah, we have no problem because we know we have to come back anyway. And obviously, during the course of that 5-year period, if there are issues that come up, right, with the neighbors or what have you, then that's when they're addressed. And obviously, we would address them sooner if there was an issue 2 years out, and we said, no, we'll see you in 3 years. No, we'd address that with the neighbors and the commission. But our proposal is to get approval, just like the Corps and the state approve the overall plan. And then we come back every 5 years, or whatever the time frame you say, to continue moving forward with the overall plan. Just a little subtlety there.
So we can look at this a couple different ways. So the special permit is on the entire property in conjunction with this plan as submitted. Our limitation is a 5-year permit. They are required to come back. It looks like in the Army Corps report, they're required to do a substantive summary with photos, and I'm assuming that would all be part of a renewal plan.
I think under the permit issued in 2014, we'll give them a report in 2019. That'll be the first time we do that.
Okay, so at the time, if you were to apply for a renewal, which you would have to after 5 years, then you would also be submitting the same summary report that you submit to the Army Corps.
Sure. Absolutely.
So those were my items for discussion, if the board members have any input or feedback on how you want to proceed. So the options are approve the entire plan, understanding that in 5 years, they're required to come back, so nothing can be done beyond that 5-year window. And at that time, review progress and make any adjustments.
Just to mention, there are other gravel excavation on the opposite side of Black Hill Road. That was a couple hundred acres that we approved a few years ago as one large project. And they do come back every 5 years and give us an update on what they've done. With this plan here, they've done, their plans are in accordance with all our regulations for gravel excavation. They've gone above and beyond with their restoration or engineering, which is just an environment.
Are there any other items of discussion? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion on the application. A member has to make the motion, the chairman needs to make the motion. Okay, and you're motioning for approval of the... Okay. And do I have a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so application is approved. Moving on to new business. Item A, Z 2018-1300 of Summertime Properties LLC requesting a 2-lot subdivision on property located at Pickett Road and Texas Heights Road, Central Village, map 14, block 76, lot 2A, RA 60 zoning district. Do we have the applicants?
There are 3 separate structures on one piece of property. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the property to make what they feel is a little more conforming in that we still have one property, just a single building on it, and then the second property will have the 2 other buildings on it. These are multi-family homes, they're apartments. The site is rather steeply sloped in the back. Like I said, these are existing residences. They have an on-site septic system, drilled wells, and we formally split this other property to the north. This was also part of this property at one point. It was free split off. The original reason for free splitting the property off was that under the jurisdiction of the state health department, these were considered a public water supply because all of these properties, all of these buildings were on one property. And by virtue of that, they were required to stay registered as a public water supply because they had the potential to serve 25 people or more a day. It's really kind of cumbersome for a public water supply. You do have to have annual and quarterly monitoring for water quality. You have to have a licensed operator for the water supply. And technically what you really are is a little water company. So in order to get out of that encumbrance on the property, this was split off and this other 3.1 acres remains. So there were a couple of comments by Mr. Sawyer. Number one, he wanted to show the actual wetland flags on the plan. There is a wetland at the bottom of the hill here. We have not done that yet. We have not had we got the comments and we have not had the opportunity to have a soil scientist go out there. So should the commission decide to consider this, we would have to table it until those actual wetland flags were done anyway. The building setback lines have been added to the plans. And as you can see, this existing two-story raised ranch apartments is non-conforming in that it doesn't meet the setback requirements. It doesn't currently either. On the other hand, we can make these conforming and meet the setback requirements for the area shown as Lot 1 for the 1.7 acres. I believe the letter from NDDH was submitted for the record. Yeah, and NDDH they are familiar with this property because there were some recent improvements for the septic systems that were done within the past couple of years. New tanks were put in, and a couple of the leach fields were updated as well. Parking for Lot 2, we had actually shown a parking area over here. This is what currently exists out there. We were actually showing it being improved and so forth. So we removed those proposed parking improvements there. Should the commission feel as though it's necessary, we could most likely do something similar to what we did here and create a parking area that might be a little more conforming with what the commission of the town prefers out there. The last couple of issues were items with regard to the zoning regulations. One of them being the 60,000 square foot contiguous buildable area for each lot, and the other open space and fee in lieu of open space. I have Attorney Bill McCoy here to discuss those two issues with the commission because he's probably a little more qualified than I am.
Thank you. For the record, Attorney Bill McCoy, I have had discussions with Mr. Sawyer last week with respect to particularly the buildable area issue, and this is an unusual set of circumstances because normally when you do any subdivision approval, you're subdividing land into building lots. You're trying to locate the feasible area for locating a house or a structure on the lot. In this case, you already have the house and structure on the lot. Not only do you have the house and structure, you have the on-site septic and the wells already there. So that the whole rationale for having a contiguous buildable area is inapplicable to this application because you already have the structures and the necessary infrastructure in place on the proposed lots. The purpose behind this plan, frankly, is to create more conforming lots to what is already a pre-existing non-conforming situation. In other words, and in fact, if we go back historically, you had 4 lots on a single lot. Sorry, 4 structures on a single lot. This one has been split off in a pre-split. As a result of this potential subdivision, you're going to have a single structure on one lot and two structures on the other lot. The only issue relative to your regulations that I'm aware of that is an impediment to this is the contiguous buildable area. And we're asking you to either waive or dispense with that requirement because it has no applicability to this particular application. Because the purpose behind it is to determine where the structure and where the infrastructure are going to go. They're already there. And they're in that sense, zoning compliant. Now, you have another feature of your regulations that's important to understand. Normally, if the buildable area was part of your zoning regulations, we could ask for a variance of that requirement. Yours, uniquely to Plainfield, I think, it's a subdivision regulation, not a zoning regulation. So we can't get a variance of a subdivision regulation. So the only mechanism for dealing with this issue is to ask you, in your judgment, to dispense with a requirement under subdivision regulations which has no applicability to this application itself. So that's our request. I've provided to Mr. Soya a fax letter with our argument on that. Mr. Soya has indicated that he may wish to have that reviewed by town council. I have no issue with that. There is no question that your subdivision regulations don't have a specific requirement for a waiver, but by the same token, they don't have a specific requirement that prohibits you from waiving. And I guess what I'm asking you to do is to apply common sense to this application. Now, with respect to the issue of open space and or fee and lieu of open space, the only issue I would say to you is that open space with respect to this particular subdivision probably doesn't provide any benefit. And your subdivision regulations refer to you may require, not that you're required to require. I have less of an argument with respect to the fee and lieu, but I would suggest to you that, again, the open space requirement with respect to this two-lot subdivision is something that you could also not require either a fee and lieu or a set-aside area. Again, this is a almost 1.4 acre parcel, number two, and number one is a slightly more than 1.7 acre parcel. There really is nothing useful that can be carved out of that for open space in this particular situation. Particularly with the existing properties already developed, both with driveways and with structures. If you have any questions, Mr. Sawyer, do you have anything you want to?
Oh, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll go with the easy one first. I do agree completely with the open space requirement. Typically in subdivision, you're taking open land and it's being developed. That's not the case here. The land is already developed. It does not appear as if you can develop it anymore because of the wetlands on the property. And so you do have the authority to waive the open space fee or fee in lieu of open space, and I would suggest that be done. However, with the other one, our design and construction standards state that subdivisions shall be designed and constructed to conform to the town's plan of development, subdivision and zoning regulations, and engineering standards. Notice the word shall. We go down to section 11.5. Proposed building lots must contain a minimum contiguous buildable area defined in section 3.11 of these regulations, which shall be equal to or greater than the minimum lot size required by the zoning regulations for the district in which the subdivision is located. If you go to section 3.11, you'll see that wetland areas and maybe something else there cannot be counted as part of the contiguous buildable area. I did look through the subdivision regulations, I think Bill did too. I didn't see a waiver provision where you have the authority to do that. I understand and I agree with them that everything's already here, but I don't see how it can be waived in this particular case. I would recommend that we go.
Can I interject one thing?
Sure.
One thing.
Just state your name for the
Norm Tebow, Killingly Engineering Associates, my apologies. One of the, as you were just reading through that, one of the things that kind of caught my ear, you said proposed building lots.
Yeah.
These aren't proposed building lots, these are developed lots.
I would argue that too. And
And-
so I would suggest that we send this to our town.
Sure, and then are there any of the non-conforming, I think it's section 14 that would be applicable in this case, and the non-conforming section of the
Well,
regulations? Because I
yeah.
think there is a provision that talks about making something more conforming. So it's still not conforming, but more conforming. But regardless of that, I would want legal to weigh in on it, because I don't want to set a precedent for future applications where somebody could just walk in and say, oh, wait a second, way back in 2018 when you did that thing, now you've set a precedent and opened the town to a liability. We don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I understand that. I would tell you though, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm pretty sure that you're not gonna come up with this one again, but
Yeah.
you could try.
But just if somebody would want to use it as a case, because you know how you like to
Understood,
argue.
understood.
So given that information, I would like to continue this to the next month to get legal input on how regulations can be applied and if there is a waiver or exemption before we even think about discussing the possibility.
I'll make a motion to continue.
Okay, motion to continue. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Before you do that though, my concern was that one of whose requests was to flag wetlands, and obviously we didn't want to go to the expense of that if it was unnecessary, but Mr. Tebow indicates that that's not a problem, so we'll deal with it.
Okay. So we have the motion to continue to the next meeting, so if anything comes up, obviously we can discuss it at that time.
Thank you.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, continue to next month. Moving on to item B, Z 2018-1313, Eric Lato site plan review. Do we have the applicant here for that?
What's that?
Site plan review? Eric Lato?
No, that's
2008-1313?
Ernest.
Oh, Ernest Colella, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Norm.
Okay, Norm, you're up again.
Again. And, which one am I, right now, is this the?
1313, it's Ernest Colella site plan review.
Okay, great. For the record, and once again, this is just being received this evening, just to give you the nutshell. In review of this, this is a property at 28 Main Street, Route 14, Linnell Street, Main Street, right here. It's currently a vacant property. There was a building, was an existing concrete foundation on the property. And what is being proposed here is just a professional office and a couple of garages that will be used to house construction equipment. It's Mr. Colella's desire to kind of create his office here and have some and have a couple of garages to store some of his equipment there. The site is going to be improved by doing a little bit of repaving, some restriping, adding a little bit of a more defined entrance to the site, fencing it in, and just really kind of cleaning it up. Right now, it's something that's not very attractive. Next month, I will bring for the record. I'll bring some copies of the elevations of the buildings, how he perceives them to be.
Okay, so you're not prepared for tonight's meeting?
Well, as is this new construction, if the wetland commission wants to see this,
Okay.
it's within 100 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got the Hoosick River here anyway, so we do have to be before wetlands anyway, so.
Okay,
um,
so this
we-
is
we
just
will-
a preliminary?
This is just a preliminary, just
Okay.
to kind of give you a flavor for why we're here.
Okay.
Kind of-
So is this the Village Auto property in Hoosick?
No, bank.
The
Oh,
old
the old bank.
bank, the old bank property.
Okay,
The
got
building is
it.
not bank.
Okay, I'm on the other side of the road, got it. Bank property, got it.
Norm, just one thing, would you submit this to DOT, or did you already?
I did not, but
If
Is that
this
the
is
same-
changing and they want to see that.
I will.
Okay. All right, so this will be continued
Yeah.
with a,
My friend Carlos will be happy to see it.
all right, so do I have a motion to continue to the next meeting?
I'll make the motion.
And do I have a second?
The public doesn't get to say anything.
This is not a public hearing for that, so correct. Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that's continued to the next meeting. Moving on to Z 2018-1314 Dolly 11 lot subdivision. Yeah, and that would need a public hearing.
It's up to you, it's a subdivision plan, so a public hearing is not required. However, there are 11 lots, and I don't know if the public would be interested or not, but that's your call.
It is, it's the way I read the regulations as well. It's certainly your call as to whether or not. What we've got is about 12.1 acres of land.
Where are we?
We're on the corner of Smith Road and Moosa Pond Road. The town beach is a little further to the east over here. And the lots themselves, we have 1, 2, 3. Gonna be about, there are 5 lots that are actually gonna have little strips of frontage on Moosa Pond. We're showing some minor clearing and some little beach areas and so forth that we're gonna have to go to wetlands with. These are on-site drilled wells, public sewer. These are pumps. There's the sewer force main. Is a little further east off the page here, but what we have is 11 individual grinder pumps feeding to a force main that will be installed substantially within the shoulder. There's a point where, because of things like utility poles and things of that nature, we're going to have to probably go into the road to do that. As part of that, and in accordance with the public improvement standards, they will have to mill and cave to the center line of the road for any disturbances along the road. No other public improvements aside from that. We're not, obviously no roads here. Utilities will just come off the existing utility poles, and then, like I said, on-site drilled wells. That's about it. One house already exists. This existing two-story wood frame house, and the outbuildings are already there. So a good portion of that lot is, we're trying to kind of keep it intact with a lot of the amenities and the outbuildings that are on that lot itself.
You propose to knock the house down though, right?
There's been back and forth. Bruce, you gonna knock that down?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's about it for now. So, and the other question, and I think, trying to get the thoughts on the commission on the open space issue. Once again, regarding open space, I think it kind of comes to, what exactly is going to be valuable as open space. 10% of the land put aside. Really, I think the only usable area, or the area that could be considered for it, is also area that I think is going to be desirable for people who are living there too, to have access to the lot itself. I don't believe it's really a real suitable area here. There's nothing contiguous to anything else where you could provide a contiguous strip of open space that would connect to something else within the town.
So are you going to consider a fee in lieu of open space then?
That, I believe that would be the most appropriate
I agree.
on this particular site, yes.
So when you get the appraisal done, don't include the house.
Right.
Okay, so it has not been reviewed by wetlands yet.
It is not.
Okay. So the question before us tonight is, do we feel a public hearing needs to be required? And regardless of that, it would have to be continued to next month because we have to wait for wetlands approval regardless.
Correct.
Okay. So it's up to the board whether you want to require a public hearing or not. And then, once that's determined, then I would entertain a motion on continuing to next month.
I wouldn't want a public hearing on this one.
Yeah, I'd like to see them.
Okay, I would like a motion, please.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor of public hearing next month? Any opposed? Okay, so that will be scheduled for public hearing next month. And with that, we should hear from wetlands by then, right?
Yes.
They have that information.
Yes, they will.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. See you next month.
Thank you.
All right, so the minutes from the 10:10 meeting, that member is no longer part. Unless a member has listened to the minutes, we can't take action on that. Right. So I'm going to talk to the clerk about filing those as in absentia, I guess would be the term. Did everyone review the February minutes? And were there any additions, corrections, or changes? Okay. All right, if they look good, I'll entertain a motion on the minutes. a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Moving on to correspondence.
Oh, we did receive a packet from our building official regarding the house that's going to be taken down on the last subdivision.
Ah, fantastic. So we'll include that in the public hearing.
You can, but you only have until March 22nd.
Okay.
Comment.
All right.
That's the one. Minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting on March 12th, where Kathy was appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Welcome to the board.
Town of Brooklyn has some zoning regulations, changes regarding home offices in Brooklyn. DOT is still reviewing elderly housing on Ward Avenue.
Yep.
So they have to submit some stuff to us. I paid your fee for the Connecticut Federation of Planning and Zoning Agencies,
Thank you.
so you're good for another year. As far as the POCD, as you know, Carla, it was completed. I finished the modifications, submitted it to the Board of Selectmen and to NECOG on April 9th. So in our original discussions about this, we decided we wanted to submit it no later than May 4th so that we can have a meeting, this commission could have a meeting on June 12th and schedule a public hearing for July 10th. We're in accordance with that. Singular Wireless is going to be doing some work at their facility at 954 Norwich Road. Same thing here for AT&T, and copies of the Connecticut Federation of Planning and Zoning quarterly newsletter.
All right, so a report from zoning enforcement.
Okay, we're still working on 29 Basley Road, which has a large number of dogs at the residence, and the property owner is working to evict the tenant. So at some point, hopefully, we'll be done with that situation. 39 Daggett Street, roaming chickens, that didn't really go anywhere. Could never find the chickens out there. Told the neighbor to call back and complain if they were out again. Never received any complaints, so. 26 Suzie Ave, we have basically a junkyard over there. They have been notified by State Marshal. They have until April 24th to completely clean up the property. I'm not sure they're going to make it, so we'll see how we're making out next month.
Okay.
Snake Meadow Hill Road, commercial trailer on residential property, and that is scheduled to be removed in the near future. And that should be it.
Okay, thank you. Report from planning and engineering.
The River Street Bridge is under fabrication now. I'll be going out to bid for contractors in the next week.
All right, excellent. All right, so under other, we have discussion of Ryan Daler Pond Hill Road property, zone change / conservation subdivision.
What's one word? Professional engineer to discuss.
Okay.
Good evening, my name is Wes Wentworth, professional engineer and soil scientist. We're civil engineers, Lebanon, Connecticut. Here I have the owners of the property. I'm just kind of running through a quick history. This is 27-acre rear parcel. It was approved in around 1988. Subdivision was, for whatever the reason, was never filed in the town clerk's office. At that time, it could have been, maybe a crash in the late 80s, I don't know. They did box the road out and put some and/or most of the drainage type things in. Property was cleared or partially cleared at that time, but now it's kind of basically a gravel trail up there. You can even pick it out on like an aerial image, Google image. On that. So what it is right now is it's one piece of property, but this was approved in 1988 and has since expired. Where we are, this is Pond Hill Road. We're on the east side of the pond, east side of the road, northeast east side, probably about 3/4 of a mile in from Snake Meadow Road. And secondly, a little oddly about the property is that everything surrounding it is RA60 zone, and this piece is RA40. So it's kind of like a spot zone in the middle. This is a conventional layout. Since that was done in 1988, you know, was it 800 foot? Is that the cul-de-sac line? 800 foot cul-de-sac line in from existing town road. So that would bring this up to this point. You could get 3 frontage lots and 2 rear lots off a common driveway. So right now, we've gone from 14 lots down to 5 is what you could yield doing a conventional layout on there. What we're here just to get feedback before we move forward. We don't want to run into a brick wall. We just appreciate any comments or concerns that the commission would have up front. Would be, we would like to do a conservation subdivision. Would look like this. And what we could do is we could do a common driveway in, you know, some steeper slopes and wetlands around in this area, and it goes down here. And we could, show an hatched area, we could meet your conservation or open space subdivision regulations and save over 50% of the parcel in a conservation easement and access it with a common driveway and build the 5 houses up here at this point. What this entails is, one, we would need to, that's not allowed in an RA40 zone. So we would have to get this a zone change from RA40 to RA60, which would get rid of the spot zoning. It would make it consistent here. So I don't think that's from my perspective, an outlandish request. But again, we are looking for feedback. Secondly, the conservation subdivision approval, which is a special permit process. And by doing this, we're protecting a lot of the steep slopes and especially that main ravine down through there. There's a water course down through there that ultimately goes into the pond across the street. Thirdly, Lou and I spoke today, and he brought up the question of where does the cul-de-sac line start? Does it start out at Snake Meadow Road? You have probably, what, a 12 or 15,000 foot long road, Pond Hill Road, by the time it wraps all the way around. I assume there's no emergency connection between the 2 roads on the west side of the pond. There's no way to physically, I mean, they're like this, and
There's a
probably
big
go
elevation
between.
change there and emergency vehicles.
So again, I quickly looked, and let's say this point is 3,000 feet from Snake Meadow Road. And we wouldn't be building a cul-de-sac, but a yield plan to show that we could get the 5 lots conventionally would require on paper a cul-de-sac. It just brings up an interesting question that what I had is, firstly, if the end of that is 12,000 feet away and you're going in from 3,000 to only 3,800, are you increasing the cul-de-sac length? You're doing a small spur off an existing road. Second question is how many houses can you add on Pond Hill Road? There's a lot of vacant properties that, you know, when you get into public access. So those are our big 3 questions. Zone change, thoughts on conventional subdivision, conservation subdivision, rather, and the ability to say that the yield plans would not be built. This is just per your conservation subdivision regulations say if the town road were built, we feel we could get 3 front lots and 2 rear lots, and that would require a cul-de-sac 800 feet from the road. Is that something that this commission could review and say, yes, that's an acceptable yield plan? We wouldn't actually be asking for a cul-de-sac to be built. And then ultimately go in with the common driveway up to these lots. So that's why we're here. Just
So this would be-
fact finding.
So the conservation subdivision would have a private driveway instead of a cul-de-sac road.
And essentially, that driveway's in now. It's gravel. It's been there, my guess is probably since the late 80s, so 25, 30 years. I've walked it. It's stable. There's no drainage or erosion issues. It's in good shape, and you can basically use what's there. I mean, maybe just top it with some processed gravel and just make sure that if a cross culvert under here, make sure that's operating, but it would be very minimal impact to the land, and you'd be able to get in and access these higher slopes where, it's a little bit more mild up there, the slopes.
Does the conservation subdivision reg allow one driveway to be used for 5 properties?
Up to 5, a covered driveway. And after that, it goes to a private
Okay,
road.
I'll have to reread those.
I think he's right. Actually, I did have a part of this way back in the day. I did the original subdivision. I also did the zone change on this back into RA 40 because in the late 80s, when Joe DeVerna was first elected, he did have plans to put sewer around Lucid Pond. And
Gotcha.
that's why it was rezoned to R 40. That never happened back then, actually. No, it just happened in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So rezoning this to RA 60, I don't think that's an issue. Would be
Consistent with the surrounding area.
Exactly. Everything else is RA 60.
And this is not an application, this is a preliminary discussion, so no decisions are being made tonight. It's just to give guidance to the applicant on which route he should pursue.
Now, the other part about the cul-de-sac road, I think you can actually interpret it 2 ways. I'll read you the regulation and tell me what you think. Cul-de-sac road should have a length less than or equal to 800 feet from the center point of the intersection of an existing or proposed road to the center point of the end of the cul-de-sac. A new street in excess of 800 feet shall have 2 connections to a street that's a through road. The first part of that mentions nothing about whether or not the road that you're starting from is a dead-end road. So you can interpret that, yeah, you have a dead-end road, you can put another road 800 feet on. But if that's the way you interpret it, keep in mind that it's going to be like that for any future applications. Whether or not that's going to cause any issues or problems in the future, I really don't know. To have an additional 5 houses off of Pond Hill Road here, I don't really think it's a big deal. But other places it might be so.
Sounds like the intention was that if it's not a through road, we gotta consider it to be starting 800 feet from the through road.
But they don't say that. So it could be interpreted either way.
I do
And that's the decision that we have to make here.
And past practice, we haven't had a situation with this
That's the first time.
off of a dead-end road.
Yeah.
Any dead-end road can have a new road spread off of it 300 feet.
And the
Well,
advantage.
that's right. That's what can happen in the future, whatever you do now.
Right, but I'm saying that obviously the intention was not to allow it to come off of a dead-end road.
Well, I looked through the original file, there was no intention there, so we don't know what that
Yeah,
is.
so we're inferring.
So,
So, I mean, the positive aspects of the conservation subdivision is that the cul-de-sac requirement is no longer there because it's a driveway.
right, you can have a longer road with a.
And then the other advantage of the conservation subdivision is that a larger piece of the property is preserved and not developed, whereas the conventional is more divided and sprawled out.
And it requires 50% minimum reservation. It comes out to be a much larger piece of that because you take your developable area, so you back out your steep slopes and wetlands.
Right.
Then you take 50% of your remaining, what's called good land.
Good area,
land,
yeah.
Right? So, and you're gonna still protect all the wetlands and steep slopes on top of that.
So is that really the route you were looking
That's
towards
That's
going?
where we like to go. It would be a nice
Okay.
development suitable for the area.
So
You
the
still
steps-
have, good sized lots up
So
there.
the steps for that would be the zoning first and then the application.
I don't see an
thereafter,
issue with the zoning, the issue is how do we want to interpret the dead-end road?
Which is not an issue we have to address if it's a conservation subdivision.
Well, no, it is.
It is.
Because he has to show a conventional subdivision of 5
First.
lots out of the work. In order for him to show
Got
that,
it.
we have to determine whether or not he can put a new road off of an existing dead-end road. Now,
The yield plan concept has to be based on a traditional
Gotcha,
subdivision.
because they can convert back to the conventional.
we have a
So-
choice as to whether or not we want a conventional subdivision or a
Right.
conservation subdivision.
Exactly, but both have to be conforming, and given we're not sure of do any of the commission members have an opinion on the interpretation of that regulation? I just see it. Section. Cul-de-sacs. All right, so cul-de-sac roads shall have a length of less than or equal to 800 feet from the center point of the intersection of an existing or proposed road to the center point of the end of the cul-de-sac. So So that's the language we're interpreting.
See, if it had said through road there, there'd be no question, you couldn't do it, but it
Right.
doesn't. And I honestly don't know the answer to this. I am going to be going to John Casey, our town attorney, with the other things, so I can run this by him too.
Might be best. Yep,
And then, at what point do we fix the language?
right, exactly. That was my
You
next
can
thing.
do that anytime.
Yeah,
You got to decide what you want it to be, if you want it to be from the through road.
right.
But let's see what Casey says.
Okay. All right.
And, we'll take it from there.
Okay.
I feel more comfortable doing that.
So you could proceed with the zone change, because regardless of whether it's conventional or conservation subdivision, the zone change would be advisable.
And we can do that with just Class D mapping,
Yep.
is that something?
All right.
You can do that with a copy of our assessment.
Like that even better.
Was there any other items under other?
Yep, there's just one more thing under other.
Thank you for your
Don't say it, Lou.
Yes, I am. This is my last meeting, so I'm retiring next Thursday. Thanks. Oh, no.
Congratulations to you,
I'm here.
sir.
Thank you. We don't know yet, we haven't decided.
In progress. The search
We may
will
not
be
have
on.
anybody, I don't know.
I'll go one day a week.
All right. So besides Lou's retirement, is there any other items under other? I vote no. I don't think that's within our purview or power, but that would be, I would vote no with you as well. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. One second, all in favor? Thank you, everybody. Anybody opposed? I don't think so. All right. Have a great night, everybody.